Just punching it in now. Once that does, I'll start the record as well, buddy. And I guess I'll pitch in with some spiritual concepts somewhere in there. Like Bhagavad Gita talks about being detached from the fruit of your results and just going in regardless of what the outcome's going to be. You just bloody go all in. I'm sure I can lift up something, you know, whatever, to add some flavor to the whole thing. We're 2 on already, brother. I'm gonna 3 on. Hey, welcome, folks. We are live. We're just getting started, so come on in, come on in, come on in. Okay, folks, join us. Thanks for joining us. A Walk on the Wise Side. Here we are. We're all hopping on board, so join us. Say hi, click in and say hello. Show us a little love. Okay, we're gonna have Rob. We're gonna start with a little breathing. So Rob's gonna just take us through a bit of breathing right now. He didn't know he was, but he is. So Rob, let's get everybody to do some deep breathing while we're getting everybody on board.
You know, no joke, in the military, that's the first thing that you concentrate on, right? When you learn how to shoot. Yeah. Breath control is very, very, very important, mate. It's kind of, you got to breathe in, hold half a breath, gently squeeze that trigger and let it go again like that. So we'll start with that, shall we?
Let's breathe in. Yeah, let's do it.
So, holding in half of it.
Holding in.
And letting the rest of it go.
Beautiful.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Let's keep doing that. Let's keep doing that, Rob.
And then I can just see the...
Folks, we're learning breathing transformational techniques from a man who was in the military. We're going to learn about Rob's journey a little bit, take a dive into that. This is a man who has more to his bows than meets the eye. And we're about to discover a whole bunch of stuff about how Rob has transformed his life from what it was and where it was in particular to where it is today. And the smiling, youthful, boyish face that you see in front of you was not always this way. And we're going to learn about Rob's background. Let's get this breathing going, folks. Let's get this in the Go All In group. Let's rock and roll, guys. Okay, we are on. Folks, thanks for joining in. I'm taking it that your Tuesday evenings are gentle and pleasant, and that you've had a good weekday so far. It's early in the week. I know how I can get with the grind. If you're feeling the grind, click in and say something, because you showed up. You took the time to be here right now. So there's power in that. There's power in showing up. So folks, welcome. Let's get underway. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to A Walk on the Wise Side. You're here with your host, Prash K, and the handsome man to my left is none other than Mr. Go All In himself, Robert Brus. Robert Brus, and that's without an H, folks, unless you want to get a clip around the ear. Robert Brus is a man who I must share a little bit about his background. This is a man who's been in the military, not one military, multiple, and he's had the pleasure, displeasure, pain, grit, and experience that can only come in a career or a lifetime spent in the military, as he has done in the years gone past. I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'll let him talk about his military background. But not only is this man a military practitioner, a member of the Australian Defence Force, the man is a goddamn pilot. He flies planes. The guy has to have a brain and a heart and his wits about him. He flies planes. The guy's a pilot. He's airplane mad. Oh, did I mention that he runs his own digital marketing agency and SEO agency and 2 other businesses? I have no idea how he manages to have a beautiful wife and kids please put your hands together for the Australian tornado, the one and only Robert Brus.
Well, thanks, Prash. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, mate. I'm glad you're recording this. Next time somebody asks me about me and they want a bio, I'm just going to point them at your Facebook Live.
Right
so
here.
I appreciate the kind words, mate, and the kind sentiments. It's really great to be here and to be able to share this with you.
So, Rob, I want you to just share a little bit about yourself, man. You dive straight in, brother. Don't even wait. I mean, I'm losing you. I'm not hearing you here.
Nah, well, I can talk about myself for hours if you want me to. That's not an issue. So, as you alluded to in the introduction there, I was in the military for a long time. I was in the Royal Australian Navy first, and then I was in the Australian Army second shortly after that. And I was lucky as a young guy to have been able to experience all of those things. So for any people out there listening and watching that are not sure what they want to do with their life or with a career or with a job when it's early on for them and they've got no commitments, I would highly, highly recommend the military. And really, look, it doesn't matter if you're in the Royal Navy, in the British Navy, or you're in the Australian Navy, it's the same thing. You'll get to experience the same sorts of things with your friends. You get to travel the world, you get a pocket full of money, and you get some incredible skills. And you make friends that last you an absolute lifetime. But gosh, it can be a very, very challenging environment for a young person. And I think I joined when I was 17 and I grew up by the time I was 17 and a half. And the 17 years prior really didn't set me up for any sort of success whatsoever in the military, because they have a great way of breaking you down, making everybody the same, and then building you back up again as well. So I was, fortunate or maybe a little bit crazy to experience that type of thing twice in my career, once in the Navy, then again in the Army. And then I guess the third time when I got out, because that was a pretty rude shock as well. After nearly 9 years of being there, it's very, very hard to make a transition onto the other side. And I think maybe in some ways that's a little bit by design, where they strip you away. You want to leave, it's just a job. You just want to resign, you fill in the paperwork and you're out of there, sort of thing. But the day comes and it's sort of a big event, because you can't just quit your job inside of one day or 1 week. It takes you 4 or 5 months to get out. It's just an administrative thing that happens in all large government organizations. And by the time you get out, you sort of think you're ready, but you get out, everything's stripped away. That lifestyle, those uniforms, those people, that's all gone. And really that's a pretty big time in anybody's life, making a transition. And look, you don't have to have got out of the military to have experienced something like that. It's just changing jobs can be a rude shock for you like that. Changing relationships can be a shock for you like that. And any changes that you have that create a bit of an upset in your life can be stressful. And, you got to look inside yourself. You've got to dig deep and you got to find out what's motivating you. You got to find out what your whys are, and you got to drive really, really hard and set some goals and shoot for those goals.
Yeah, I want to touch on that because sorry, Rob, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
I was just going to say, not many people experience that kind of career. And I don't know, folks, if any of you have been in the military, if you're listening to this, watching this, click in. But to be able to be in a position where you are entrenched, if you can call it that, in a career where people's lives are in your hands, directly or indirectly, you play a part in the lives and the protection of lives of the people who you are entrusted upon, or the people who are entrusted to you. And to have that then pulled away at a certain point and say, right, you're out on your own, buddy. You're going to have to find your own way, get a normal job, become a citizen of the planet, become a corporate guy or gal or whatever you're supposed to do. Surely that in itself is a hugely challenging situation to be in. Not least, it's one thing when you're by yourself, but then to have mouths to feed. Can you talk on that a little bit about those challenges that you faced?
I think anything that you do in life is relative. If you don't want to swap problems with somebody for a day. And sometimes you look at other people and they have an incredible job. They seem to have an incredible life. But if you really swapped with them for a day, you probably wouldn't want to stick around there for very long. Right. And I think the military itself has a way of getting you to experience things that you otherwise wouldn't experience, because you're quite correct. your life is in other people's hands, and very, very often you've got the lives of other people in your hands. And it shines a spotlight on things, and it really has a way of amplifying stuff. So the feelings that you would normally get on the way to work of, oh my God, I got to go and do another day, and you're in the grind and it's a slog and it's really, really hard. That's amplified by the military by a magnitude of about 50, because you're on the way to work going, oh my God, I've got to deal with these 50 people. I've got to run these lessons. We've got to do this dangerous stuff. We're going out shooting. We're going out parachuting, whatever we're doing. It can be the relativity factor of it is kind of dulls it down at the time while you're doing it. But when you look back on it, yeah, for sure, it's definitely has a way of amplifying the feelings and the emotions that you feel in there. And I think most people experience the same things as what people experience in the military. I mean, gosh, running around with a gun and kicking indoors and doing that type of thing is not the same as sitting behind a desk managing projects, or, you know, doing custom service or looking after people. But really, at the end of the day, it's relative. It's just a job. And that's the job that you're paid to do. That's the job that you go and do. And I think as a younger person, you accept the risk a little bit more, or you think you're invincible, or you're a little bit naive and you don't really know what can happen on the other side of it. And I think it's not one of those particular things. It's a combination of those things and that's the reason why soldiers particularly are usually young people. You don't see a lot of soldiers that are in their 40s, because they've kind of grown out of being told what to do. They've grown up from what it is that they've been doing, and running around with a gun and kicking indoors in your 40s is really hard work. So that's not something that older people really necessarily want to do. And 40 is not old. 40 is young. It's very, very young.
It absolutely is. I'm here to tell you it's young. And I think you can tell me.
Me too. Now I know now too.
So listen, what was your first experience when you had to go all in? In which area of your life did you first have to go all in? What was that like, and how did you do it? Give us a summary of that.
You know, I could probably pick 20 or 30 different moments throughout my military career, but the one that sticks out the most is actually when I left the military. And it's for the reasons that I kind of alluded to before. And it's more in and around having everything stripped away from you, and you kind of lose all of the friendship and the camaraderie that you've had for years and years. And again, at the time, you probably don't really realize or notice that you have that. But once that's stripped away from you, you realize very quickly that you relied on that a lot. You relied on your friends a lot. And then suddenly, you know, after being institutionalized, if you like, for that amount of time, suddenly I had to be reliant on myself. And I didn't go to a job. I got out and me and two of my mates, we started an electrical contracting company. And so that, you know, there was no income there. I had two small children, a wife that came back to Sydney with me because we didn't live in Sydney, and she had to get a job, and I was working on that business. I was gone, you know, 17, 18 hours a day, and just learning to become self-reliant was very, very hard. And I got out prior to all the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and whatnot. But I had been overseas, and I had been overseas on operations a couple of times and seen conflict and whatnot. But the transition that you make from being institutionalized to becoming, you know, to finding yourself, they say it takes 1 or 2 years, 2 to 3 years for every 5 years that you're in. So I was in for almost 10 years, and it did take me about 2 or 3, almost 4 years, I would say, to transition from the military. And that's just a mindset. You know, I didn't have to turn up 5 minutes before every time. I didn't have to iron my clothes all the time. I didn't have to polish my shoes anymore. They're just all those little idiosyncrasies that you don't realize that you do when you're in, that you don't have to do when you're out. And it was pretty rocky there for a little while. And, you know, I didn't suffer from PTSD or anything like that, but I did suffer from being institutionalized and suddenly not being, and not having, and I was now responsible for it. So I really did have to go all in and try and find myself. And again, you don't realize that these things are happening to you while they're happening to you. And it's not until you're on the other side of it that you get a little bit of clarity about it. And as I look back at it now, I think, wow, man, that was a really pretty rough time in my life. And I was pretty vulnerable in a lot of those circumstances. But it is what it is. You just work through it at the time, especially when you don't realize what you're working through. And I come out on the other side, and I'm a stronger person for it.
Rob, I mean, that's a challenge that anybody, I think, could probably try to comprehend, and you've been through it, so you know. I'll tell you a little bit of mine, since we're talking about that. I think for me, the first time I went all in was when I lost my mum. And when I lost my mum, she was like 42. And I've said this on a previous episode, losing my mum was massive, as I guess it would be for most people. I know you're blessed because you still have your mum with you on this green earth. And what a great part of the earth to be in Australia. So yeah, I lost my mum when she was 43, and it was a really difficult time. And losing her kind of put me in a position where, you know, there were 3 men in a house, myself and my brother. And that was a difficult time. You know, we weren't sufficiently well versed in the running of a household. It had all been done for us. We had the matter of bringing in an income, which my mother was doing alongside my dad, and I had to then pick that up. And I think that was the first time when I realized that if I don't start picking up some household responsibilities, if I don't play a better big brother and like a junior father figure, and if I don't go and earn some money, forget about the fact that I was at high school and I was going to get into college. If I don't do those 4 things now, then we are in for a really shaky ride, and it could damage permanently the 2 other individuals in that house, emotionally, psychologically, whatever. And I think that was the first time when I said, I've got to go all in. What did go all in for me? It meant that I didn't have any qualifications when I was 14 or 15. I had to go get a news agent's job, any other kind of job I did, just to start bringing in money, just to support my dad, you know, who was on pennies. The guy was on pennies. So I took a job, had to study, learn how to cook. I went all in and figured out how to cook. I read books. There was no internet in those days, so I was reading books. I was asking family members. My family are excellent people. They were really kind. They taught me. And then it was just going all in, experimenting. I even made omelet one day when I was eating eggs in those days. And I made omelet. Get this. I thought I could make omelet. And I had milk. And Indians put milk in omelet, by the way. It's an Indian thing. You put milk, onions, and whatever. Anyway, so I had the milk. I had the onions. I just didn't happen to have the eggs. I thought, who cares? I ain't got the eggs. I got the other 2 things. I even remember making my first omelet, which my mom used to make for us, pouring oil in the frying pan and then just putting milk and onions, throwing it in there, and thinking that I'll make an omelet. Who cares about the eggs? Yeah, it's like blew up. And I remember just learning silly little lessons like that taught me that, you know, it's okay to fail. Because the next time I never made that mistake. I realized my mistake straight away. So is there something to be said about how we can stop fear getting in the way of going all in, even though we know that going all in could mean a whole ton of fear, whether it's in your career, whether it's in the house, whether it's taking the plunge and marrying the person of your dreams, and you've got a whole bunch of worries there. What can we do about fear?
Well, the first thing I would say is that it's not really appropriate to go all in on everything all the time in your life. You're only going to do that when it really matters and when it really counts. And sometimes you don't realize that you're actually doing it. Like in your circumstance you're describing there wasn't a conscious moment where you said, oh, well, I've got to go all in and just keep doing this. You just realized, you just unconsciously realized that you had to actually help, and you had to go and do whatever you had to do to actually help. And whatever obstacle came up in front of you, it wasn't really an obstacle. It was just a challenge. The one thing I'd say about failure is that people are worried about failing a lot of the time because they don't think they're good enough to do something, and then they fail at it, and then they're like, oh, see, I knew I wasn't good enough. And it's a self-esteem issue. So if you put your self-esteem and your ego aside for a second, the chances of you having a go of something like that are much, much higher. But I think, personally, and in my experience, because I work in this kind of this motivation space, if you like, a lot of people are worried about failing because they're worried about what other people are going to say about them. So here's what I'd say to that. Fail fast. Yeah. Have a go at stuff. And when you fail fast, all the people around you will say to you, see, I knew it. I knew it. And they give you a hard time. And if you're any sort of person, if you've got any sort of character about you, you'll get rid of that thinking, and that headspace is now gone. And now you can go, all right, well, watch this. Yeah, sure, I had to go at it. I didn't do so well. I failed. And then look inside yourself and fight really hard. Fight like you've never fought before. Fight like your life depends on it, and go all in on it. And when you go all in on it, it means you're trying as hard as you can. You're doing your very best. And when you do that, you live up to your potential. And when you live up to the potential that you have, not in the future, but right now, because you're all in on it right now, you give back to the world because you're giving your very best to the world. And when you give your best to the world, I think personally, you make it just a little bit better incrementally every time that you do that. And that's why I think the go all in philosophy is such an important thing, because if you go all in on stuff, it means you're living up to your potential and you're making the world a better place by doing that. So it's really, really important that you do that. And along the way, you're going to fail. You're going to have challenges, but there's no way in life that you're ever going to learn how to do something unless you fail and unless you have those challenges. So if you can put your ego aside and not worry about failing and just have a go, and if you fail, just kind of shrug your shoulders, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go again. And then if you can put that fear of what other people are thinking or saying about you aside, I think you give yourself a better opportunity to succeed in life in the things that you want, whether that's finances, whether that's business, a relationship, or something else.
Let me chip in there for a second and throw a spanner in the works. So ego and fear of failure. What if the fear of failure has a material impact that is associated with it? So for example, let's say that you are somebody, you're in your prime, you're in your 30s and 40s, which is your new prime these days, of course, and you feel that you need a change of career, you feel you want to move away from a situation, or you feel you want to come out of a relationship, maybe a long-term relationship. But to do so would mean to jeopardize the income that's coming in that would sustain your family, for example, or splitting up with somebody would mean the intense reputational damage that may follow with it. What thoughts can you share that could help somebody to kind of contend with a situation like that and still do that? Is it that, for example, it needs to be done go all in, whole hog? Are there stages of going all in? Could it be that we're going all in by steps? We're not going all in at once. We're going all in over a period of time, maybe. What's your thoughts, buddy?
It's a really good question, and it's a very, very important one, because on a daily basis, you're faced with literally thousands of decisions. You've heard this before, and scientists have proved it that most of the decisions that you make throughout the day are unconscious. I went and made a cup of tea, and I'm sitting here drinking a cup of tea talking to you, but I didn't even really think about doing that. It's just something that I went through because it's the time of the day that I do that, and I'm going to do something social and talk to somebody, so I want to have a drink with me. That's unconscious. When it comes time for you to make a conscious decision about something, if you've got something that you can rest on and something that you can use as a tool to help you make those decisions and filter whether this is going to work for you or it won't, that will help you make better decisions. And what I do is I lean on what I call my core values. And core values are the things in your life. They're the guiding principles that help guide your belief system. And my life as an entrepreneur, as you alluded to in the introduction, I'm faced with a lot of different decisions all the time. And people come to me all the time with different opportunities, and clients want to become JV partners and all that sort of stuff. And in my life, I've started a lot of things, and I've also not completed the same amount of things as well. If I stuck with stuff a little bit longer, then I would be 10 times more successful than I am. And it wasn't until somebody taught me about core values that I really understood why all of those things fell by the wayside. And it's because it didn't align to what my belief system was and what my core values were. So here's the crux of it. If you're faced with a really big decision in your life, I would stop for a minute and work out if it aligns with my core values or not. And I'll give you some context here, because my core values are really, really simple to understand. They're easy to remember, so I don't have to really think about it. and it helps me with my decision-making process really quickly. So the first, I've got 3 core values. And again, it's an oversimplification, but it works every single time for me.
I love it. No, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think people need to develop their own version of these things in order to help them with decision-making processes. Totally. So things don't seem so insurmountable all the time. So my core values, the first one is to always tell the truth and to be honest. And that's with other people when I'm dealing with them, and then with myself. The second one is to help others, because I think it's really, really important in this world that you help other people. And the third one is to do the right thing. So if I give you some more context in and around that, I say to myself, a property deal came across my desk just a day or 2 ago, and I was looking at this property deal. And so you can be sidetracked by something like that really quickly and really fast. And property requires a lot of analysis and a lot of decisions about stuff. And it's a little bit kind of dry and boring as well. Some people love property, but it's just really about numbers. So the context of my decision-making process in and around that is, the first core value that I have is honesty. Am I being honest with other people in and around this? Well, it's not really about other people. So am I being honest with myself?
Right.
Now I've got to ask myself a series of questions. Does this property meet my needs from an investment strategy? Does it fit into the portfolio? Does it yield the return that I want it to return? Does it have a risk management profile that is sensible to me? And if I can't answer a definitive yes to all of those things, then I'm not really being honest with myself. No, it doesn't have the risk profile. No, it doesn't have the return. And if the worst case scenario happened, can I really afford it? Well, yeah, if I'm prepared to take the commercial risk and do that, but am I comfortable in doing those things? Because I'm ticking no to all the boxes before it. So it's a no. So now I've got a big fat no to the first core value that I've gone through. So I don't waste any more time seeing if this is going to help some other people, because I know property helps other people because they can live in it, they can rent it. And it definitely, am I doing the right thing by doing that? No, I'm not. Straight away, I'm not. I'm not doing the right thing by my family. So using core values to help you with the decision-making process will help you to decide whether or not you want to go all in on something.
Love it. Love that. Absolutely love that. So folks, there's a takeaway. I'll pin that in the comments here, folks. And by the way, I want to hear from people here. Let's get, Rob and I, let's get some views here. Penelope said something so obvious and yet so true. So true. Penelope, thank you so much. Penelope says, mothers can relate to going all in at all times. They have no choice. When you become a mother and you have somebody who is entirely dependent upon you, you have no choice but to go all in. You got to go all in. There's no choice. It becomes something that it's just instinctual. You do it. And I think that's a powerful thing. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about situations where you are pushed to the wire. And folks, I want you to click in here. If you're experiencing this, have you experienced a time in your life where you didn't actually choose to go all in, but life forced you to go all in? Kind of like my situation with my mom, Rob, your situation. You were forced to go all in. You were out of the military. There wasn't a question at the time of going back. So you had no choice but to create something outside. So folks, click in and share your views on when you've had to go all in. But let's touch on that, Rob. Let's talk about situations where, for example, the hand is forced. Your hand is forced. You got to go and do something. You haven't had a chance to process whether that your values are aligned to that situation, but you just got to react, right? You're made jobless. You've got people depending upon you. You've got to go and get anything that you can. It may not align with your values, but you've got to do it. There are people out here who have been on the receiving end of, the loss of a loved one, so many significant things in life. And I know people, and I'm not going to name names, people who've had, unfortunately, a life of crime, and they've ended up being in prison. And, it was done. But what they did, how they handled it, that became a go all in choice. Let's talk about that for a minute. How can we help people? What advice can we give to people who are forced to go all in a situation? They can't necessarily check if something aligns with their values, and they've got to react very quickly.
Well, the parent example is a really good one of something happening slowly over time, especially if it's your first kid. I like that as well. And I would echo that as well. I've got 3 children, so I know exactly what it feels like to go all in with your children there. And that's definitely something that you have to do. Crying babies in the middle of the night are hard work, but you've got no choice other than to go and pick that beautiful little baby up and give it a feed and then change your nappy and put it back in. You go back to bed, and then 5 minutes later you're up again, do it all again. And that's just necessary. And I think as humans and as people, we just know that we have to do that. That is what it is. It sucks. It definitely sucks. But look, to your point, in and around an emergency situation or a really unforeseen accident or problem or something happens in your life like that, often you're forced to go and do something else. You're forced to take that job that you don't like. And I would say, if I could go back in time and spend 5 minutes with myself, what would I say to myself? And I always say that stick with stuff a little bit longer. Just stick with it. So even though you might have been forced into a situation or a circumstance that's beyond your control, if you've got the metal within you, and most people do, most people can dig themselves out of that hole and they just keep pushing forward and forging forward, and they've got the emotional muscle to do that. But then you find yourself in a circumstance more often than not, and I understand, and I've been there myself, where you're in a place where you don't want to be. I would say just stick with it. Just hold on. Life's not that bad. You know what? When somebody's shooting at you and you're trying to dig a hole with your eyelids because life is pretty scary and somebody's trying to kill you, that's when you've got really, really serious problems. If you wake up in the morning and your feet are pointing at the ground and nobody's shooting at you or trying to kill you, well, it's not too bad. There's all those quotes that fly around on Facebook and Instagram that says, if you've got a family and you've got fresh water and you've got food and money in your pocket, you're richer than you think. And it's true. It really is true. It's a matter of perspective. Just a matter of perspective.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And here's another quote. Sanj just clicked in. Sandra Gani. Sanj, thanks for being with us. You always contribute value. Sanj says, don't limit your challenges. Challenge your limits. Love that. Don't limit your challenges. Beautiful. Challenge your limits. Jerry Dunn. Sanj Golden, thanks for sharing that. I want to share something which I think is pertinent from one of the, or possibly the oldest literature on military strategy, military and spiritual strategy, based on a battle that took place, and that is the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita, one of the oldest books known to mankind, over 5,500 years ago, was captured in written form. And spoken by Krishna to Arjuna. The whole thing takes place on a battlefield. So the divine is speaking to the mere mortal. And, in that, there's a beautiful verse that speaks to what you've just said. Krishna says, let me see if I can remember my Sanskrit. I got to dust it off. Matra sparsastu konteya tam stitik sasvatu bharata agama piyayino nityas tam stitik sasva bharata. That's roughly what it is. Probably messed it up. Those 4 lines, it says one needs to learn to, just like the summer and winter seasons come and go, so happiness and distress, pain and pleasure will come and they'll go. They only last for a season and they go. One needs to learn to endure. There's this word titiksha in Sanskrit. Titiksha means to endure under great duress, under great stress. You may be pushed down, and that glass ceiling is pushing down on you, but you have to endure. And that word stamstitikshva, you have to endure. And Krishna says you will pass through that, you will rise through that. And we obviously see Robert Brus in front of us, the living example of a man who's been through wars, literally, and who's with us here in the comfort of his beautiful sea view apartment somewhere in Sydney. Not a bad thing.
Let me give you a modern day military example of that. I like the military analogies for obvious reasons, right? And in the military, you get put on a lot of courses, and some seem like administrative courses that, the necessary skills that you have to acquire in order to do your job. But then there's some things that are really, really exciting, like a parachute course or a military freefall course, or you might want to be in special forces, so you have to go to a selection course and you got to pass barrier tests. And these things are designed as filters. They're designed to filter the people out that have got the right headspace and they're the right body type, because you need to be of certain strength and endurance to be able to do certain activities, particularly in the infantry, because it's very hard work, right? You can't be a 50 kilo, 5'5" person, man or woman, and be expected to walk around with a pack that weighs 70 or 80 kilos for 40 or 50 kilometers. You just physically, it's not possible. And then to pick up somebody a little bit bigger like me, that's, 95, 100 kilos, and carry all my equipment across the battlefield if I've been hit, that's just not possible for a smaller person. So there's a lot of testing and barrier testing that you go through, in the process of doing the course, and it gets you there. And eventually I've arrived on many of these courses, and when you get there, you're all excited by it, and then all of a sudden it becomes very, very hard. It's really, really hard. And you look at yourself and you go, man, I didn't think it was going to be this hard. This actually really sucks. And it really sucks. I remember when I was in the Navy many moons ago, and I was on my ship's divers course, and every warship has a team of ship's divers who are required to do husbandry on the ships. Sometimes you come alongside and you need to fit grates, and you need to do husbandry on the bottom of the ship. You need to clean the prop. There's work that needs to be done under the water. And the ship's divers are the people that jump in and do that. And sometimes it's in the tropics. Most of the time it is. It's pretty cool. But sometimes it's in really dirty places and it's a bit ordinary. And you really have to learn to deal with cold water. And you suffer. There's no other way to say it. You suffer in the cold water. And I can remember being on my course. It's a 3-week course. It's not very long in the scheme of things, but about a week into it, you start your night diving sequences, and they teach you to scuba dive at nighttime, and they teach you to do husbandry on warships at nighttime. And you're driving around in Sydney Harbour at wintertime when it must be probably about 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, and the water is about 14 or 15 degrees. So it's warmer in the water than it is out, but your body temperature gets cold really, really quickly when you're in the water like that, wetsuit or not. And you would spend in and out of the water 13 or 14 hours a day, in and out of the water, that cold water like that. It's raining, it's windy, it's awful on Sydney Harbour. You see these beautiful sunny pictures of bridges and opera houses. And yeah, it's like that. But when you got to get in the water, it's freaking cold.
It's a different thing, yeah.
Yeah, and you really suffer through that. And, you don't struggle. It's suffering. It's painful. They get you out of the water, get you dry, give you a hot cup of coffee or a hot chocolate. They drive the boat halfway up. Yeah, they drive the boat halfway up the harbour thinking, teaching you that, hey, we're going back now. And then they stop the boat and they throw all your wetsuits in the water and tell you to get in the water and get dressed again. And then you got another 5 or 6 hours worth of swimming to do or something. It's just ridiculous, right? Yeah, and they do that to try and break you, and they want certain sorts of people on the course. They want certain sorts of people that qualify, and they're using it as a filtering mechanism to make you a better diver that's more skilled to actually deliver the work that needs to be done. But you know what? On the other side of all of that suffering and that heartache, and that sucks, and it sucks badly, is something pretty cool. It's a qualification that you get, and it's a badge of honor that you get to wear. And I can remember being in the tropics where everybody was dressed and the ship comes alongside, and they've got to go and empty all the bins and do all of the menial, ordinary tasks that you have to do. And I'd be walking around in a pair of shorts and swimming in the harbors of the world and watching everybody else do the work. And my salvation at that particular time was, oh my God, thank God I don't have to empty the bins. It's 45 degrees outside, and it's just suffering. On the other side of suffering is salvation every single time.
I love that. Rob, thanks for those contributions. I want to chip in with a few comments that have been coming in, and I want to take that comment. Arthur's with me, a good friend of mine, Arthur Bucast. Love it that you've joined. Hope you and Tamara are enjoying. Arthur says, how about leaving your oldest daughter in a country and not being able to bring her over and away from violence in that country? And that harrowing thought that you've left your daughter in a country where there's a lot of violence and you can't just bring her back. You can't repatriate her. How hard and difficult must that be for a parent? Shittos clicked in saying, as a working mom with a big family and health issues, I have to go all in. I have to. Thinking positive and self-motivation is very important. Got to keep going and smiling, part of that. Serafina, thank you so much for joining in. Let's just get one thing clear. The world is not going to stay there and pat you on the fucking back. The world is not going to pat you on the back. People aren't going to come and tap you on your shoulder and say, hey, Rob, hey, Prash, hey, Shittle, hey, Arthur, you're doing a great job. Let's come and give you a hand. That's not going to happen. Shittle, you've got a really powerful point here. Don't wait for somebody to motivate you. Don't wait for somebody to tell you to go in. Go all in without somebody having to tell you. Take that by the horns, take the ownership and just dive in. Literally dive in. into the situation and know that on the other side of that is a stronger, more resilient you. And here's a fact, Rob, as parents or anybody who has dependents of any kind, or you don't have kids, you're in a relationship with somebody, that other person is relying on you to get your shit together. That other person is relying on you to hold your shit together. If you care about somebody, you want to hold your shit together. So if you can't use that to motivate yourself, what else can you do? You've got to use the fact that other people are relying on you and you yourself are relying on you to go all in. Let that be motivation to push you beyond the edge. If you're on the edge, if you're not sure whether you should do something, and if something is holding you back, let that simple understanding compel you and drive you forward. And if you hold on to that along with the values that you talked about, your core values, then you have a powerful way to lead yourself forward.
Yeah, I would echo that. And many times in life you find yourself where you feel out of kilter and it doesn't feel right. And I really can't offer too many comments about leaving a kid in another country when you've got no choice. That's scary stuff. And I'm not sure how I would handle it, but I'm certain that that person has done whatever they've had to do to make that a better circumstance and a better situation. And they've had to go all in. They've got no choice. They've kind of been backed into a corner to be able to do that and to have to do that. But I would say that if you find yourself in a situation where things are not feeling right and things are not going well in your life, to stop what you're doing just for 5 or 10 minutes, and everybody has 5 or 10 minutes. There's no excuses. And ask yourself if it aligns with core values. And if it does align with your core values, and you are, for me, it's really easy for me. It's about doing the right thing, being honest, and helping others. And if one of those 3 things is not quite right, whether that's me doing that or somebody doing that to me, then I know why I'm feeling like that. And I know that I can take back control of the situation. Because if I talk about honesty and telling the truth, if I'm doing the right thing, but I feel like somebody's not doing the right thing to me, then I've got a really quick and fast solution that I can deal with there.
You can deal with straight away. Absolutely.
Not being straight with me, it's bullshit. I can solve that problem. I can make that happen, and I know how to solve that problem. And I always come back to those core values in my life, and I rest on those. And that works really, really well for me. That's been a sensible tool that I've developed for myself over years and years, I guess, of maybe not suffering, but struggling with stuff as well. And I haven't been in a circumstance outside of the military where I've really suffered or been forced to suffer in an environmental circumstance where it's really cold or you're hungry or you're wet or you're thirsty or something like that. But certainly I know what it feels like to struggle with finances, with family, with relationships. I definitely know what that feels like as well. And everybody does.
Yeah, everybody's got that. And Sam just chipped in here. Is life not about going all in? Surely whatever we do requires an all-in attitude, whether it's in school, work, or business. Absolutely, Stan. People can embrace that. Going all in isn't just an amazing movement that Robert Brus has started off in Australia, which is doing really well and helping so many people out there. But going all in is
someone asked me the other day, hey, someone asked me, hey, Robert, are you all in on your relationship at the moment? You've been in a long-term relationship. You've been with that girl for like 13 or 14 years, whatever it is. And I'm like, baby, I'm always all in, but I've relationships have ups and downs, and my relationship's not perfect by any stretch, and we have our challenges and our issues as well. And you gotta ask yourself, do you have to be all in washing the dishes, or mowing the lawn, or folding the washing? Do you have to be all in on that stuff? Well, maybe if your relationship's not going so well, and you get the housework done in the background and you do the right thing and you help out around the house a little bit more, maybe that's just like a little incremental step towards improving a relationship or mending something that went wrong after an argument or something like that. But look, you don't have to be all in on washing the dishes or mowing the lawn. Nothing happens if you don't do that, or you do it in the morning. It's no big deal. You know what I mean? Yeah. But life is about going all in, and it's about having the right attitude and giving your best. And when you give your best, I just keep coming back to saying it, when you give your best, you live up to your potential. And when you live up to your potential, you make the world a better place because you're giving your very best to the world.
Absolutely. I think living up to your potential is such a key part of that. I couldn't have said it better. Reed's chipped in here. Reed, what's up? What's up? She says core values important. I also think there are times in life as we progress, grow, and transform that we need to evaluate I would say, reevaluate whether or not they still serve us. And I think that's Reed's point. You have to reevaluate whether certain values are serving you. I think being open to self-reflection is extremely important. Mike is joining. Raise a mic. What's up? Chicago in the house. Let me just say this. Reed's brought an important point here. So two things here, two additional lessons. When you want to go all in and you're trying to go all in, reevaluate the values that you have. Perhaps the values that you had, the younger you, may not have the same values that you have now. And that's okay. It's okay to not have the same values. I think it's less okay to just go with what you got and assume that that's going to serve you. I think a regular check-in or a periodic check-in to know that the values you have are serving you are right. I'm going to give you an example. I know somebody who has for many years been a polygamist. So he's had several partners at the same time. And that's great. Yeah. I mean, he had a great time. It's great for him. I mean, let me be careful with my words. He had a great time, and it was a wonderful period in his life for him and for them, the consenting adults with whom he was in. At some point in his life, about 3 years ago, actually, he met somebody who he felt was the right person for him because he had outgrown the people he was with. Guess what? For him to go all in, because it came to marriage, I think they courted for about a year, and it was crunch time. And he had to reevaluate that core value and say, is part of being a free lover part of my value set anymore? Is being a lover to many part of that? Or do I need to embrace monogamy as a part of my future life to be that person? So sometimes you may have to sacrifice a value or reevaluate a value that you have in proportion to the way you're evolving as a human being. And let's segue from that into the people that you're around. Let's talk about how people around you may be stopping you from going all in, either because of their negative self-talk. Rasprit, Rhonda, we've talked about this on this show previously. Negative self-talk from inside and naysayers from outside. These are two other enemies that we have. Any quick tips on how to deal with those, Rob?
I'm a little bit more of a simple person, actually. I don't have a lot of self-talk going on inside of my head. My decision-making process is pretty straightforward. I know what needs to be done, and I go and spell it out. And I document what needs to be done, and I make a plan to go and do that. That's worked really well for me in my life. I can't really remember a time recently. I probably have, but I can't remember one recently or an example where I've said to myself, oh, you're not good enough to do that, or you can't do that, or what do you think you're doing that? I just sort of make a decision about what it is that I want to do, whatever that might be, and I go and do it, and I make that happen. And of course, along the way and along the path of doing things, you start to feel those feelings about whether or not you're worthy, whether or not you should be doing those things. And I guess my self-talk is not so much in my head, but it's how I feel about things, which I guess is an easier thing to deal with, because if it doesn't feel so great, you just move away from it and go somewhere where it feels a little bit better. And I sort of move away from things that don't feel good like everybody and just gravitate towards the things that do feel better like that. If you're, tips for going all in and not feeling so great about it. A friend of mine, Lee, she said her mum gave her a good bit of advice, and I always remember it. And it's a really, really good bit of advice. And she said, do it afraid, do it anyway. And if you're not feeling good about it, you're worried about it, it's not feeling so great, do it anyway, do it afraid. And when you do it afraid, there's a little bit of suffering, there's a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of fear there. But on the other side of that, that's where salvation and happiness resides. And that's really, really exciting.
All right, I like that. I'll take that. I think not everybody listening to this has as simple an internal decision-making process as you, as in me. I'm definitely not as simple as that. And I wish I was.
Too much self-talk, man. It'll be the downfall of you. Don't worry about it. Just make a decision and do it. Don't worry.
Friggin' make a decision and do it. Sarah Hart's clicked in. Sarah, our fellow good friend, she says, realize nothing will ever be perfect, but work towards closing the gap between when we are off and where we are on. Beautiful advice from JTA herself, The Journey to Authenticity. Sarah Hart, her podcast, go check it out. Do a shout out. Reed's clicked in as well. Now, Reed's got a challenge on her hands because she's not only working in her own life, but she's having to teach other men to go all in their lives. Men with Difficulties. Reed is, of course, as some of you may know, the successful host of A Breakup to a Breakthrough, an excellent podcast show, especially for men, to help bring out the best in themselves after a difficult time in their lives. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. So bringing it back to this point, yes, we can deal with our mind by making decisions that are sometimes hard to make and make them decisively, even if we're faced with adversity. We'll use our values, our core values. We'll reevaluate our core values. We'll look at our personal circumstances and decide whether going all in means going all in at once, or whether it means going all in stages. That's great. Now let's talk about the naysayers for a second and the do-gooders. Let's talk about the people who might be holding us back because they're worried for you, right? The person who's saying, no, Rob, how can you go into that career over there? That's just not for you. You shouldn't be doing that. Or, Rob, no, if you do that, I'm going to leave you because there's no way I'm going to follow you here. There are people who, those people, what can we do?
Well, look, I think that there's two types actually, and there's one that you didn't say. There's naysayers and there's haters. And I think the parents on this Facebook Live and on this call that are listening in would agree with me that when somebody says to you that, hey, you shouldn't do that, or you can't do that, or you shouldn't be doing that, I think what they're really saying is that they can't do that, they shouldn't do that, and they shouldn't be doing that. I think it's the people, when people lay their own self-belief and their own expectation on another, that is something really negative. And I think you need to be careful of doing that in your life to other people as well. You know, and sometimes naysayers are usually the people that are closest to you. They know you. Hey, Prash, what are you doing that for, mate? You know, why don't you just stick to your day job and just concentrate on that, man? Because, you know, that pays the bills and that does this and that does that. And what they're really saying to you is that they're not willing to take a risk. They're not really willing to put themselves out there and to do that. And naysayers, I think, can be the most damaging of all because they're usually your friends and your family and your loved ones and the people that are closest to you. So you're going to be really careful with naysayers and make sure that you take on board what they're saying, you listen to it, but you also look at the point of view that they're giving it to you from, because usually 9 times out of 10, they're telling you can't do something because they can't do it themselves. And one way to deal with it is just to acknowledge it. Yeah, sure, you're right. I probably shouldn't do that. And then they go away because their opinions are validated, and then just go and do what you're going to do anyway. A man's going to do what a man's going to do, right? That doesn't matter what anybody says. The other one that happens as well in life is there's people that hate on you. There's a lot of haters in the world. There's a lot of keyboard warriors out there. And I think people get more.
Love that.
Yeah, people, you know, every now and then I see somebody on my Facebook are like, bye-bye Facebook, I'm leaving. I don't want to do this anymore. And it's like, my God, you're like having a tantrum and throwing your toys about somebody saying something on Facebook. People are allowed to have opinions. People are allowed to say stuff. People are allowed to be offensive, and all the political correctness in the world is not going to stop them from hating on you if they're going to hate on you anyway. And I think it's really, really important that people are allowed to voice their opinions, but it's how you let those opinions affect you. That's what matters. And naysayers are pretty dangerous because they're friends, family, and loved ones. And I'd be very, very careful of that. Haters, I just acknowledge that. I love the haters. Bring it. Because haters make me improve. Oh, that's terrible, Rob. What you said on that podcast was terrible. What you said on that show was terrible. And people saying things that I did wrong, it's an opportunity for me to improve.
It's an opportunity.
But here's the thing. Yeah. Haters say stuff behind a keyboard in a nanosecond of thought, and they're typing away on their keyboard or on their phone. And it only takes them a second to do that. But in reality, haters don't produce anything. They don't create anything. They're not the creators of the world. They're the critical critics of the world. And naysayers, likewise, naysayers rarely produce anything.
And let's just say, let's not rule out the fact that we do need haters and naysayers around, because we do need critics. We need critics.
Absolutely.
We need people who are going to challenge our mettle, who are going to challenge our will, right? Without that, we'll get complacent.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And what you do with it is really totally up to you. But I would take the haters and that stuff and use that as fuel. And you need to define and work out in your life whether or not somebody's hating on you or they're a naysayer. And if they're a naysayer, just be careful, because that's more dangerous than the haters that are around you, because they love you, they care about you, and they're saying these things from a place of love. and they're not saying it from a place of, oh, you're an idiot, I don't like what you're saying, I don't like your opinion, my opinion's more important than yours, or whatever, man. That's your opinion. You're allowed to have that. That's important that we have a robust debate in the world. Just don't be a jerk about it in the process of hating on somebody.
I love it. Thank you, Rob. There's some wise words here. I thought of the analogy, and I think really we need to be a little bit like a missile, but a missile that's been prepped first. Like before a shuttle launches or before they launch a missile, and obviously I'm speaking to somebody who's probably much more familiar with this territory than I am, but before you launch a missile, a number of, especially if it's a significant missile, any kind of projectile has a number of checks that are done before that missile is launched. And I think that analogy can be used here with your military background, that if you're going to go all in, first of all, decide that you want to launch that missile. When you've decided you want to launch that missile, do your checks. Make sure that you're not going to be damaging nobody around you. If there are people preventing you from doing so, address those people, the naysayers, the haters, or ignore them, right? Align with the values. That is, the values are the people and the circumstances around you. In the analogy of the missile, you've got a missile to be launched. You want to do all your checks with the people around you. So check in with yourself. Are you aligned with your values? And when you are, and you're ready to pull that trigger and launch that missile, go all in. Check the fuel. Are you going to go on a rocket fuel type basis, or are you going to go on a gradual fuel basis? Decide what kind of go all in is to be applied. As you said earlier in this interview, going all in full steam in all situations is not necessarily the right way. But choosing how you go all in, when you go all in, and how fast you go all in, these three hold the key to bringing more success, I think, in the way we do things. And you launch your missile accordingly. Rob, anything else to add here, brother?
I love the missile analogy, man. That's really, really true. I would add to it just a small bit as well. I've been lucky enough to actually have 6 war shots under my belt. I've been involved in 6 missile firings in the real world on guided missile frigates. So firing a standard, what's called an SM-1 missile. It's an anti-aircraft missile. And you said all of the things correctly there. We train for air defense, because that's the role of a guided missile frigate, is to stop enemy aircraft getting at an aircraft carrier typically, or getting at the refueling ships or the other assets that we're protecting and we're guarding. So a guided missile frigate practices a lot with different air forces around the world, and airstrikes coming at you, and these things come at you really, really quickly, and it happens quickly. And often when you sit there at a radar screen and you're watching that happen, and you're fighting the warship, so to speak, and you're fighting the sensors of the warship, and you're utilizing the weapons to protect and to do its job, it happens really, really quickly. And I can remember in training for quite some time wondering if this was all for nothing, and wondering if it was any good. And when it came time to do some live fire exercises and get a couple of shots off, it wasn't all for nothing. All the preparation that we'd done was actually for something, and it did work really well.
It worked.
Yeah. And the part that I would add to what your sentiments were about making sure you've got a plan and make sure you're guiding yourself correctly is make sure you've got a team around you, because firing a missile, believe it or not, is not a one-man job. There's not one man with his finger on the button or a finger on the trigger. It requires a team of people. And if I explain to you in an operations room of a guided missile frigate, there's a track supervisor, there's an air warfare officer there, there's an air picture supervisor, there's the electronic warfare guys, there's the captain, yeah, there's the ops room supervisor, and there's 3 people on a console. So there's 8 people involved in firing one missile at one pilot screaming in at you at the speed of sound. So if you've got a team around yourself and you've got a team of people that are around you, you're more likely to be successful and to succeed. So I would say surround yourself with people like you, with other people that have got the same philosophy of going all in on things and being successful in things. And the more you surround yourself with like-minded people, the more chance you give yourself of success in whatever that might be in your life.
Love it, Rob. So beautifully put and so appropriately said, folks. We are doing our best through these shows to give you the opportunity to be surrounded by people. We're bringing good people together. I know for a fact that everybody who joins these calls has a heart and a mind and an intellect, and they want to help one another. And this is the beauty of these sorts of tribes and gatherings. I'm honored to say that we have that. So join us. We have our own tribes, and you're always welcome to hop on board. We have the mantra therapy group. We have the urban spirituality group that we've now set up and that will be growing. Join us. And of course, there's Go All In. So you're absolutely welcome to join us on the Go All In group. Go find us, hop on board, join the dialogue, start surrounding yourself by a tribe of people, whether it's in London, whether it's in Australia, or whether it's internationally, as we're bringing together, Rob, you and I, across the continents. You and I are doing this and creating powerful damage. We're creating weapons of mass information, not weapons of destruction here. This is weapons of mass empowerment, weapons of mass information that we can use, weapons of wisdom. Let me call it that. Information is one thing, but wisdom, the ability to apply that information, that's golden. And that is what we're doing. Rob, you've shared your wisdom. Thank you for being a gentleman as always. Well, you're not always, but you are here. So I love that. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Prash. My pleasure, mate. My pleasure to come on and to share it with you. And if anyone wants to reach out, please do so. You can just find us on Facebook. It's pretty easy. Just search the hashtag and you'll see it. It's not an issue. And I'd love to connect with you, and I'd love to see you inside the Go All In group as well.
Rob, raise your chest up a little bit and let everybody see that amazing logo. There you go, folks. Go all in right there. Join Rob and I. Will be on the Go All In tribe. And we'll be welcoming new members coming along here and sharing and caring as we go on this journey. And folks, if you're in London, I am cordially inviting all of you on Sunday, the 12th of August, to join us for our Mantra Therapy Outdoor Summer Love Jam, where you will 100% be surrounded by an awesome tribe of people coming together for spiritual wisdom, joy, togetherness, and so much more. So Sunday, 12th of August, check it out. And last but not least, we have Tuscany. You're welcome to join us for one of our retreats. Tuscany is the next one. We're going in October. You can go all in and leave your work life behind for 4 days, come back refreshed, and go and crush it back at home. That's it from us. Thank you. Forgive any mistakes or any technology issues. We're just authentic people speaking from the heart and sometimes shooting from the hip. But that's all good. Rob, thank you so much. Peace out to you. Blessings for the day. Folks at home and on the ether, thank you so much for tuning in. Share the world, share the word, share the love, and share this message out to people. God knows we need it. Stay close, stay true, be yourself. Namaste. Prash out.
See ya.